Magmortar burning up your opponent's active Pokemon while using Itchy Pollen to keep that item lock going. But, well, from Frankie, what do we see here?
Frankie's going to be playing the Joltik box, a pretty traditional archetype, nothing too surprising about the deck list, but I think it's really going to be all about Daniele, because this has been an archetype that's been touted really since this Volcanion EX was released, and it's almost like a throwback. It reminds me of old Seismitoad EX. It had such low damage output, so then you would have to put in Muscle Band, then you would have to put in Verbank City Gym and Hypnotoxic Laser, ramp up that item lock so you can maintain it the entire game, and this is why we're trying to recreate it. We're using Volcanion EX to burn, then trying to ramp up the poison damage during Pokemon checkup via the Stage 1 Magmortar. So this Budju is going to be doing far more than just 10 damage with Itchy Pollen.
And we've already seen Budju with the poison do so well. You see, of course, winning with Ryuki. But here we off. Frankie starts off the game with Joltik. Not what he wants to do. Wants to be sure to go second and use Joltik turn 1. But essentially with this Joltik Miraidon deck, what you want to do is you get a Joltik early. You get to use a Jolting Charge to charge up either Iron Hands or Pikachu, or both at once when you're using Crispin. And getting all these energies into play is going to be the name of the game for the deck. Going through the deck with Nestball here at first, looking for Miraidon, because Miraidon can get you these lightning type attackers, which entails your Joltik to charge up your Pokemon. The Miraidon, you can get additional Miraidon if you're looking at that sort of matchup, but typically it's going to be Pikachu, and Iron Hands is going to carry on for the vast amount of attacking you're going to be doing.
Yeah, this deck likes to telegraph its main attackers because of the expense of those attack costs. But thanks to little Joltik helping out, in addition to 4 copies of Crispin in the deck list, you're really trying to maintain these ridiculous energy attack costs. As indeed you said, Jesper, Nestball will grab the Miraidon EX, and a tandem unit now can grab 2 additional lightning type Pokemon. That's going to be Joltik and Pikachu EX immediately. So it's a pretty decent turn 1, all things considered. We have energy in the hand, I believe, just to swing anywhere we like, knowing that next turn Joltik can get into the mix. We won't be taking prize cards immediately, but we'll be setting up some really devastating attackers.
And yeah, you're setting up these devastating attackers, but it's also about keeping, you know, the gas going throughout the game. One thing that Joltik really has an issue with is the draw power of the deck.
Sure.
Your only draw power is in Mew EX and Festivity EX. Mew, well, you need to have less than 3 cards in hand to even use the restart ability, but Festivity is relying on your opponent taking a knockout on your board. So it's a difficult deck to set up, and you kind of have to sit with the pieces already, but we're already over to Daniele, and, you know, tell me a bit more about his deck, Joe.
Well, this is going to be an interesting one. We know that Itchy Pollen is a great attack to launch early on in the game, but it feels like Daniele has really lent into this to the full extent, to be honest with you, and straight away we're seeing the Ace Spec pulled out from Arvin. In addition to a Bravery Charm, this is going to be the big warning signs for Frankie, as we see Volcanion EX, in addition to a number of Magmar, I would imagine. One crucial note to remember is there was the 1 copy of Blood Moon Ursaluna EX in Daniele's prize cards. That's one of his sort of late game pivot attackers when he needs to move away from Budju, so not having access to that card could be a bit of an issue, but all things considered, this is a fantastic turn 1, establishing your burn package. Additionally, lots of those Magmar, and Budju is already set up, ready to go.
Yeah, and already Frankie asking about what does Volcanion EX exactly do, and he will exactly figure out what the Volcanion does, dishing out that burn with the Scalding Stream. And, you know, with a setup like this, if I was in Frankie's shoes, I would also be looking at it like, well, what does this even do? Yes, you're putting burn on me, but then I have to start remembering what does Magmortar actually do as well.
Yeah, if you're reading Volcanion EX, you probably aren't aware of the Magma Surge from Magmortar on turn 2 when we start evolving up to those. It is going to be the free retreat thanks to Skyliner on the Latias EX, straight into our Volcanion EX for that Scalding Steam ability. We'll be burning the Mew EX right now, and we are able to play a switch from hand in order to get Budju into the active position, and we will just launch an Itchy Pollen here. One of the interesting things about the Joltik box archetype, it's really low maintenance on those item cards. It's kind of emerged as an archetype, knowing that a lot of these setup decks sit behind Budju. So it goes very thick on its supporter cards, and realistically, as long as you have energy to attach to your Joltik, Miraidon can pull out multiple attacking threats, and you're still going to be relatively unfazed by this Itchy Pollen.
Yeah, and especially when you have a deck that's built around, you know, playing all these supported cards to accelerate using Miraidon to get the out of Pokemon. We're looking at a hand from Frankie, which we're very likely to see. Yes, this turn is going to end up with a Jolting Charge. One thing that's actually very cool about Daniele's deck as well, we were mentioning Festivity is one of the only draw supports, but Joe, when I take a knockout off burn with Pokemon Checkup, does Festivity work?
It certainly does not. There will be no flipping of the script if Daniele can line up the damage counters correctly, so that could really limit Frankie's options throughout this game. As it is for right now, he's happy to use Tandem Unit to find the Iron Hands EX. You've just seen your opponent Bravery Charm up a Budju, and their board is committed quite heavily into this line of attack, so it does sound very wise to start trying to put energy onto this Iron Hands EX. As we know, Ampy very much has been a devastating attacker since it was printed. Essentially found the best way to accelerate to this card in every format that it's been in. In this case, it is Jolting Charge, trying to help us get towards that 4 energy attack cost, because not only can you deal 120 damage, but you also get to take additional prize cards on a knockout. And when Budju is the sort of main early game attacker, the Iron Hands EX is going to be devastating.
And we're also looking at a situation where the Iron Hands is 230 HP. Could also be Bravery Charm by Frankie, which means that, well, Daniele is not going to have an easy time actually getting to knock it out. And with the Budju standing at 80 HP, while that still is very immense for Budju when we're speaking of that, right, it's not going to be just enough for that MP very much to actually be deflected and not, you know, get the knockout on it. And it just means that, yes, as you said yourself, we're always looking for best ways to accelerate. Jolting Charge in this format it could also just have been, you know, Electric Generator, Mirage Gate, etc., or even Archeops in the past. Sure. It's always about using a card that is so strong, and it's as strong as Iron Hands, getting to, well, technically abuse it.
Joltik certainly is the enabler in this instance. 4 energy immediately onto Iron Hands. Action passes back over to Daniele, who picks up the Jet energy. Is there a boss's orders in that hand as well, Jesper?
There is, and we can get to see the boss's orders to pull up this Iron Hands and start putting pressure on it. Because if the Iron Hands comes up and uses MP very much, Daniele is going to have a very hard time to get that one-hit knockout. But if we can get to a point where we can start setting up that Iron Hands for a knockout in the future, would be a lot better for us.
Yeah, this Joltik could easily be dealt with just by a burn, but that single price doesn't help you out too much. It's much more important to pressurize these Pokemon. If Iron Hands is allowed to sit on this board for way too long, it's just going to run away with the prize race. So it does feel like Daniele has to try and target this Pokemon if he can. The debate here is Boss's Orders versus that Surfer supporter card, another way that he can pivot. This archetype really does rely on getting in and out of the active position for that Volcanion EX to do its work. However, we are discarding the Jet Energy right now, Jesper. There is, I believe, still a switch in the hand, though.
Yeah, and it depends on what ways Daniele wants to go around this. We were talking about, of course, you want to go 2-2-2 prize race, which means that initially, even touching the Joltik seems, well, not that useful as to getting, or not getting rid of the Iron Hands, but getting closer to being rid of it, and you need to start putting that pressure on. Yes, let's go with the Jet Energy and the Brave Charm, but yes, there's already a switch in hand, so it could be useful. And with this deck, you want to be putting on the burn every single turn. Volcanion has to be active to use his ability, which means you have to use Switch and Jet Energy in combination with Latias to be able to do that all the time.
Daniele is just thinking about the rest of his turn, is now evolving into a second Magmortar, and this is a stackable ability. So with 2 Magmortar in play, during Pokemon Checkup, it will be those 8 damage counters rather than the usual 2. And we have to see a Boss's Orders here, surely. Yes, it will be. Targeting down the Iron Hands EX, followed by the switch. Volcanion can swing into the active, quickly burn the Iron Hands. We can Skyline to retreat to the Budgie easily now, into the Budgie, I should say. And it will be a pretty hefty Itchy Pollen here.
And as we see, Itchy Pollen for 10. I mean, it's decent to item lock. But then we will get to see 2 Magmortars and the burn dealing 20 already. And we have to remember to tell you guys, with burn, between turns, during Pokemon Checkup, the burn Pokemon gets 20 damage onto it. And you flip, if heads, get rid of burn. If tails, your Pokemon stays burned.
Oh,
and
it's a head
that's
split.
Massive.
That's huge. Why is that, Jesper?
Since we're getting 20 plus the Magmortars for burn, which is 80 damage every single Pokemon Checkup, it means that going back into Daniele's turn next turn would have been looking at a 170 damage Iron Hands, which then Daniele would have been like, oh, it's easy to get rid of. Where this kind of swings the tide in terms of Frankie being able to use Iron Hands twice.
And that's not where you want to be. The more value Iron Hands can gain, the further and further Frankie can pull ahead here. So that's a huge coin flip already in this round number 4. I'm seeing already Crispin in the hand. Frankie has prized his second copy of Iron Hands EX, so he has to look towards other attackers at this stage.
And it's going to be really, really important for Daniele to kind of get around this. Frankie can use Iron Hands this turn. Even if Daniele gets a third Magmortar, he's not going to be able to knock out the Iron Hands. It even makes that burn flip that much more important this turn, since had Frankie flipped Tails on burn, he would have needed to move that Iron Hands, which is still pretty hard to do with the hefty retreat it has itself. But now being able to use Iron Hands on this Budgie, Daniele not being able to use the block moon since that's all at the very top of the prize cards.
Yeah.
And then Frankie can go for another Iron Hands knockout and then wrap up the game with the Pikachu on either Volcanion or Latias at the bench. So there's already a play out of this game happening for Frankie. What Frankie needs to get is just the energy needed for Pikachu, which they're on their way with the Crispin, and then needs to find the boss to wrap up the game after those two MP very much. So yeah, there's already a line forming where for Daniele, it's about getting as much time as you can. Just looks very difficult from this point.
Frankie not giving any time, as you can see, yes, but already powering up that secondary attacker for what might well be his final 2 prize cards. Metal Energy does come to the hand, so possibly spreading multiple threats. Of course, because the burn is during Pokemon Checkup, that will get around the Resolute Hearts ability from Pikachu, so it's not necessarily as safe as it would be in other situations. But Iron Hands is on its rampage, takes its first 2 prize cards with Ampy very much. Action passes back over to Daniele, who can once again burn the Iron Hands. Oh, picks up the Ino. That's a much better card than the Surfer that was in hand. This is great to disrupt Frankie a little bit, especially when there's only the new EX on board for an engine for that archetype. 6 fresh cards. Do we see a Budgie here at all? Ultra Ball helps out. There are 3 copies of Budgie in this deck list, so we can re-establish that.
But just re-establishing it doesn't help a lot. We're still looking at the Iron Hands being able to knock out back. We didn't even get an additional Magmortar. So again, it's going to be 90 damage, including the burn. And then if Frankie flips heads again,
don't say it.
Then Iron Hands will still survive back into Daniele's turn on the other hand, even if Frankie just goes draw and then uses MP very much. So we have to hit a situation for Daniele where, yes, goes for the Budgie, does the burn. There goes the burn, yeah.
And then we could sacrifice Budgie altogether and just grab an extra Magmortar, putting all of our Pokemon out of range of an Ampy very much now. I feel like just lead out with the Volcanion EX, force the Pikachu into the active, remove a bunch of energy in the process. There's no board space right now for the Latias EX either. This could be a way that you can target down your opponent's energy from an awkward position. I think Daniele's found a better spot right now than just unloading the lock from a Budgie and saying that, let's try and make my hit points much more robust here. And actually going into the Magmortar, has 130 hit points, and this is a risk, Jesper, because oftentimes there is the future booster energy capsule within the Miraidon player's list. So that could be a way around and to still force an Ampy very much.
And there's even just not the future booster energy capsule. There's also Vitality Band in Frankie's list, so I potentially would have liked to see either the Volcanion staying active, but then that would just be retreat plus an attachment. But then again, how would you get back that Iron Hands when it's so massive a retreat cost without the Latias?
We're still burned. Finally, the flip goes Daniele's way. Another headache for Frankie. Now perhaps you still look to use a different attacker. Are you still forced to spend your Prime Catcher here just to move your burnt Pokemon?
Yeah, but you have to hit the Prime Catcher first to be able to do exactly that. And we do see the Pokegear here. Has to be an Arven to get the Prime Catcher, which is the best card we get here.
Arven is there.
Oh yeah, we could see the Arven technically for the Prime Catcher. It gets around the burn, so there's no knockout between with the Pokemon Checkup. And then we can also get to see the 2 prize knockout, because I did see a Lightning Energy inside of Frankie's hand.
Yep, that means Pikachu can chase, or you can try and catch simply another Magmortar, because Arvin can grab the tool in addition to the ace spec here. So you're removing the burn and getting the valuable 4 prizes out of 1 Iron Hands EX. That's why this archetype is so devastating. If the Iron Hands goes unchecked, it really can run away with games, and we're seeing that again here, Jesper.
Yeah, we do see the future booster here, which is designed for these future Pokemon, being able to give them free retreat at plus 20 damage in the damage output. And yeah, as you said yourself, Prime Catcher, future booster energy capsule, Prime Catcher, another Magmortar, being able to MP very much for 140 and still getting 4 prizes out of these Iron Hands, and yet still we get to clear the burn, so there's no knockouts between turns, which is even better.
Actually spying perhaps an Earthen Vessel here. You could still attack with Pikachu, but I feel like the Prime Catcher has to be the route. With your supporter spent, wow, it's going to be the Earthen Vessel still here from Frankie. It looked like the Prime Catcher was in prime position, to be honest.
Yeah, it lead into, could have gone Prime Catcher, future booster. Gotten the empty very much on Magmortar, sitting with the boss in hand already for next turn, and being able to just Pikachu boss with the lightning energy he could have been attaching from hand. So here, foregoing that, and potentially could have gone like a more conservative route where we just set up a bit more Pikachus, and we get to get more energies in hand to make sure that we're a bit sturdier against an Iono. But I would have very much liked to see a way more aggressive wave, because when you're looking at Daniele here, he's looking at it's a spot where he just needs more time, and you're giving him more time doing it this way.
It's still going to be the KO, and in fact allowing this Iron Hands to get KO'd via Pokemon checkup with the burn here. So still takes that 4-2 swing. I suppose we'll simply promote Joltik in this spot.
This also leads with, if there's going to be an Iono being played from Daniele's side, it also leads to there being more outs in deck, which is something that Frankie could have been thinking about, is you would still have every single Arvin you draw, still an out for Prime Catcher. Every single boss you draw, every single Pokegear you draw could be an out for Prime Catcher. But then I would also like the attachment onto Pikachu. Yes, Blood Moon or Saluna could have been an issue there, but then if a Blood Moon or Saluna comes and knocks out the Pikachu with Burn Incorporated, well, you could have just, or quote-unquote just, but you could just go Crispin in that case, and then the game would be over anyway. So kind of stretching a bit thin here if an Iono happens. Yes, there's Earthen Vessel in hand, but if an Iono happens, that just gets washed to the bottom of the deck.
It would have been prime time for Daniele to start working towards that Blood Moon Ursaluna EX, but we have to stress, top of those prize cards, so not available right now. So Daniele has to find another way around this. The good news is Iono will at least be throwing a number of these cards to the bottom of the deck for Frankie, and he also already has the Defiance Band plus Budju combination. And here we see the hand disruption. There's no guarantees that this Miraidon EX can move from the active position right now, so there could be a way for you to possibly get a 2-hit KO on this Pokemon by just using your single prize Budju. And with Iron Hands EX cleared off the board, this has to be Daniele's best shot to stay in this game.
And we can even start using something like Prime Catchers to set up one of these Pikachus, saying that, well, if it doesn't move, it gets knocked out by burn. With the Budju here doing 40 by itself, then plus 80 damage from the burn, you're looking at 120. If you can actually pull up a Pikachu and do 120 to it, you're saying if it doesn't move and there's tails being flipped on the burn, it's going to get knocked out back into the alley in his turn, which is something that these Quick Punch decks, Seismitoad decks that has really wanted to make sure that the math was fixed to make sure that they would get knocked out into their turn. So here, just about you, 40 damage for the Ichipon with the Defiance Spin, and then plus the 80 damage we get from burn.
That is so much damage raining down. Daniele's built this deck to really push as much as possible. As we see another big coin flip, Heads does remove the burn. There's still a headache for Daniele now, not as easy as it perhaps could have been.
And it's 2 energies and a Pokegear for Frankie. Although it's not a perfect position. Really great for Frankie that he flipped Heads off the burn. Yes. Could get the attachment onto Pikachu, setting that up, and basically saying, next turn, I got you. Next turn, if I get a boss's orders, this game will be wrapped up in a nice and tight bow. But yeah, are we looking at retreat of the Miraidon could potentially go into the Joltik to say Jolting Charge. And
we can't play that Pokegear.
No, Ichipon still in effect.
So it will just be an energy attachment. It's, as you say, yes, but whether or not we're going into Joltik. Because we have so many grass and lightning energy already scattered, I don't think Joltik's actually doing too much. Mew EX can draw 1 card, does find Crispin. That's still a way for us to retreat this turn if we would wish. That would get a 2-prize Pokemon out of the line of fire.
Although with there already being a boss's orders in Frankie's hand before the Iono being played, it could also be nice with the Joltik to just shuffle the deck initially, to give the boss a chance to be at some other position of the deck. Although Crispin can do the same. Gets you probably a energy or 2 out, depending on how many energy there are left in Frankie's deck, but gets to shuffle the deck more importantly, making sure that it's not a guarantee that one of these boss's orders are stuck at the bottom of the deck.
There can't be many energy. There's a Lightning and a Psychic. That's actually pretty perfect. And a Grass as well, so you can just swing a Psychic onto the Miraidon EX here to retreat, keeping the remaining energy in the deck. You're already holding on to Grass energy for next turn if you need to back-to-back Pikachu for some reason.
Yeah, we could also just Crispin one onto Miraidon, retreat into Joltik, get to these 2 energies that Frankie is actually holding, put them into place to get more cards out of your deck to grab the Psychic energy. Also, putting Joltik up there, getting to get rid of those cards, have Daniele go into an uneven prize trade, which means that Daniele would still need to knock out 2 of these EX Pokemon.
I'm with you. I would have loved to have seen another Jolting Charge. It could still be on for Frankie, but having pulled out the Lightning and Grass, it may be far less in his consideration. Does he ever go in with Pikachu EX and just take a prize, go down to 1 and say that my final Pikachu is safe enough? It's vulnerable with all this burn shenanigans. You haven't seen a Blood Moon Ursaluna EX yet.
Yeah, Frankie.
We're committing here, Jesper.
Oh, I'm not sure whether I like this or not. Like, of course, Frankie does not know whether or not the Blood Moon's prize. There's no way that Daniele should have told him. So it's pretty risky here. Although, Joe, I'm pretty sure there's nothing that Daniele can actually do about this with the Grass energy already being in the hand of Daniele. And it just means that Frankie then just needs to find some way of getting Pikachu out of the active spot.
The top deck is Penny, and I don't think that helps us here. I think Daniele is staring down an awkward position. Night Stretcher can recover a Pokemon. Budju will return. Again, there's no means of moving the active Pikachu EX and attaching to the bench Pikachu EX, so in theory, you're not out of the game just yet. We will once again burn with Volcanion bringing Budgie back into the active position, and it will just be an Itchy Pollen here, but it is looking precarious from this stage.
It indeed is. So yeah, the Itchy Pollen plus burn, gonna do 90 damage. Then we need to head to the flip to go something like a Tails here for Daniele still to be within contention. There's a Tails, but going over to Frankie's turn. Yeah, a retreat and attachment to Pikachu would be enough, and that's. Again, why would the top deck boss? Why I would have loved that Joltik touch last turn.
Just top deck boss, it's that easy. I think there's actually, because we pulled 2 energy out with Crispin last turn, I don't think we can even Crispin. I think there's only 1 Psychic remaining in the deck, Jesper. I don't think we can move this Pikachu and launch our final attack with the bench Pikachu EX just yet.
Yeah,
we can check with Tandem Unit.
It's always a good thing to do, like you can just check for free, but there's 1 Psychic. Is there any other energies in the deck? I'm pretty sure there wasn't. There's just the Psychic energy, which means whenever you're using Crispin says you can pick up 2 different energy types, and then you can attach 1 from the Crispin, and then put the other one into hand. But if you're not getting 2 different energy types, it's basically just an energy search.
Yeah,
so you need to have, it's awful for a supporter, indeed it is. Which means, well, you need to have 2 different energies in deck, and if you can't have that quite, well, you're in this exact position that Frankie's getting themselves into.
I think it's still the best line to attach, retreat this Pikachu EX and go into Joltik. I can't see a safer line. You're spending resources as you go, and you're giving Daniele this lifeline at this stage. Frankie playing aggressively with his Pikachu EX, and the resources are now dwindling. Still so close to closing out the game.
But it feels like if Daniele somehow, although we're stressing this again, the Blood Moon, had that not been in the prize cards, this could have been wholly different.
Really
but one thing that is really, really important here is Frankie has to be thinking, does Daniele have it out to actually be taking out the Pikachu here? Because it just looked like if the Pikachu with the 2 energies on it is taken out by Daniele in some fashion, this game looks over, and there could still be Iono's being fired off. Iono to 1 territory is pretty scary.
So perhaps even just attaching to Pikachu EX on the bench is the best call and say the bench is full. Yeah, it doesn't need to pass. Even taking the burn damage and saying, this Pikachu's a headache for me. I want this KO'd.
And it goes up to a 170 damage off the burn. Of course, well, Frankie does have to remember to flip. Yeah, and giving the signs of remember to flip in heads. So we need to remove that burn marker too. Although Joe still looks like a situation where even Iono doesn't help here. If the Pikachu's knocked out this turn, well, Frankie just promotes the other Pikachu and it gets knockout. So, yeah, I'm not quite sure where we go from here.
It's a sad state in that the Blood Moon Ursaluna EX, not only was it the best attacker, but it was the only Pokemon that could stay out of range of a Pikachu with Bravery Charms within Daniele's list. So yeah, just going to be the Itchy Pollen without doing any burning shenanigans, keeping this Pikachu EX in the active, but we know that Frankie does have energy in hand here.
But there is an energy, and we're able to wrap up the game 1, attaching to Pikachu, retreating, and getting that last prize on the Baryu, the main opposition for this game. And yeah, going into game 2, Daniele, please do not prize your Blood Moon Ursaluna, otherwise we'll end up seeing a repeat of this exact game. But yeah, really interesting to get to see the Burn Baryu deck going on, and yeah, it's an exciting prospect to see, and we do see already Daniele on our camera here looking at the Blood Moon Ursaluna playing. Why do you have to be prized?
Let's have a look at this replay then. There were some big burn flips early on. This head flip specifically was massive, keeping Iron Hands EX around for that additional turn, so Frankie was able to launch ahead with 4 prizes, actually allowing, between turns, the Pokemon checkup, the Iron Hands to get KO'd, and just saying that the Future Boost Energy Capsule was enough. Let me get Iron Hands 4 prizes ahead with the Arven grab. And from there, just with using a couple Pikachu, it was aggressive, but it did limit Daniele into a really tight corner.
Yeah, and one thing we were talking about early doors was, well, the Iron Hand's getting full value. It definitely, demo were just needing a bit of like the Pikachu Mastery to go on, which could have been a bit more effective, but for Daniele, he had kind of the same issue with his deck as Joltik box deck has. Joltik only has Mew and Festivity to draw with, but then when we're looking at Daniele's side, well, there's also only, well, there's a few draw supporters like Iono but, and a free research, but we're not looking at a lot of on-board draw as we'd like to see in many decks.
But the good news for him is that the Blood Moon EX should be available in this game number 2 and 3.
Oh, it's in his hand, yes.
It's in his hand already. Wow, there you go. So there's already that huge relief. And additionally, Frankie didn't even see that card in game number 1 because he didn't have access to it. So the way Frankie played in that game number 1 may fall prey to the Blood Moon Ursaluna.
And triple Arven in the prices of Frankie is such an important tool to set up, get these Joltiks out. We may even be looking at a spot where Frankie can miss this Joltik because the Arven is just the most immense piece that he needs to do so, and the hand looks not too great. There is a Nest Ball, however, and this deck is super easy to set up. You just need Nest Ball, form a Rhydon, Tandem Unit, goes against your Joltik and your Iron Hands, and then you're fully set up after the first Jolting charge.
These basic decks are always known for being more low maintenance than the rest, but Miraidon among them is by far the easiest to get rolling. You only require an energy and a Miraidon EX. That pulls out not only your acceleration, but also your primary attackers. And when you leave the Mew EX as well, it's not such a headache that the Arven have actually been prized, because you don't require a switching card or a rescue board that you would typically have to grab via that supporter.
Or an extra Nest Ball for Latias, and any other of these, like you're saying yourself, rescue board, right? So again, super easy to set up. That's probably why Ross adores Miraidon. One Nest Ball and you're ready to go.
There's nothing wrong with a solid 8 out of 10 every single game. That's what we look for. Consistency. It's a word that comes up in every player's vocabulary. They want their deck to be as consistent as possible. And Miraidon getting into the game certainly is that, and no surprises. The Tandem Unit will grab Joltik in addition to Iron Hands EX. It carried the early game for Frankie in game number 1. He's looking to implore the same strategy again here.
We do have to remember for Daniele, he goes second again. First game, Frankie went first and won, which typically is not one thing that we do hear from Joltik players. They want to go second. They want to do that every single game. Although when you're losing the coin flip and you win game 1, you're bound to go second. So passing over to Daniele here, and we're looking at, we need to get this Magmar back into the bench. We do have a Surfer, we do have Nest Ball, there's Team Evolution, there's a lot of options, and I think it's also a Professor's Research that's laying out in the hand. So there's options to be drawing these cards. Nest Ball to be able to get your setup, but it's still a lot of pieces. We need, well, whatever Trolley can get us typically, but
that's it.
Volcanion, Latias to get back, Budyu to attack, several Magmars to make sure that we can set up this burn lock from turn 2 onwards.
Is that all? Is that all we need? It's a lot. The good news is you're not under pressure next turn. You know that a Jolting Charge will almost always be the attack from Frankie. There are 2 copies of the Latias EX, fortunately, in the deck for Daniele, so if you're worried about the single copy in the prizes, don't worry. We've accommodated for that with a second Skyliner within the list. It's just about piecing it together. Is it a Surfer here, or is it a Professor's Research in the hand? Oh, it's an Iono as well. Was it not Iono? Either way,
Professor's Research, it's a new print of Professor's Research from Journey Together. And yeah, really good to play that because the Joe Surfer would have gotten you, well, 1 card. Not too great in the situation, of course, that goes without saying, although we need to see something here. We do see the Magmar, but there's no energy to use with the Team Evolution, which hurts. So you did get that Nest Ball on top, although we could Nest Ball for Budyu, get the switch, get Budyu into the active position, and start swinging with the Itchy Pollen, and make sure that those pollen counts get higher and higher.
Yeah, I think it's good to just use one of these switch. Don't get too frisky getting Volcanion in and out just yet. Until you establish your Magmortar, the burn isn't that devastating, and it's going on Mew EX, which is already a Pokemon you can reach pretty easier later on in the game, provided you set your board up a little bit further later down the line. But still, announcing that Itchy Pollen will be really hindering the outs from Frankie. We know that Ball Search is premium. We also know that the Poké Gear is a big item card within this archetype to make sure they're using the premium supporter every turn. So it would indeed be, unfortunately, having to sacrifice the TM Evolution, but you at least establish your item lock here.
But you're not sacrificing for anything bad, you're sacrificing for item lock, and I think I'd take that over nothing, rather. But yeah, as you said, Ball Search is premium, can't use those balls, so basically I just have to go retreat, and could see a boss to kind of pull out one of these Magmars and say, well, you got to pull some pieces, but we do want these bosses later in the game to either pull out these EX Pokemon when we have to knock them out with Pikachu, or get some of these Pokemon out with the Iron Hands. So 10 immunity goes again. We could be seeing some Pikachu stuff happening very, very shortly, and then we start with the Jolting Charge, either putting stuff like 4 energies onto the hands, so make sure that the Iron Hands is already able to, save MP very much, multiple times hopefully for Frankie, but also get to set up these Pikachus, which are kind of the playbook from the first game, getting to set up multiple attackers and just make sure that we get the full value out of his Iron Hands.
I think you're basically giving credit for Daniele to actually play Blood Moon Ursaluna. Now you've seen it in the discard pile. Otherwise, you may just power up the Miraidon EX itself. But now that you've seen Blood Moon Ursaluna, it does make sense to still have that higher reach. But it will still be 4 energy onto Iron Hands, making no secret that this is a huge card in the deck. And certainly in this matchup, when you're expecting Budyu to be launching multiple attacks, just have the amp ready to rumble is a great policy here for Frankie. And again, it's an intimidating board state that Daniele has to look at.
Yeah, intimidating indeed. Iron Hands being such a big Pokemon with such an attack like that and just draw us into a turn. Well, we need to see multiple Magmortars. We need to see a way to get back into the Volcanion. We already do have that with a switch, but then a Latias on top if we need to deal with it. So not as good of a start for Daniele this turn, or this game rather. And well, it also means that the Bravery Charm off the Arven doesn't do as much when we're talking about getting into Iron Hands. At least game 1, Daniele could have gone, well, boss, and start, picking away the Iron Hands. Unfortunately, well, Frankie at that point flipping heads, but right here it doesn't look like things are going as hot for Daniele.
And in this instance, it would just be 1 Ultra Ball for 1 Magmortar, you would imagine. So you can get a little bit of burn damage in. You can already KO via Pokemon Checkup without this if you want to, but perhaps just Itchy Pollen for 10 is still a better policy.
It could be still a better policy to lock off the Festivity, but then again, we need to see some cards being drawn. If Daniele looks at it, it could also just be, well, I have to take his prize because that's the same as drawing card. And that's the only thing I can do to further my setup. And it does look very bleak when you're looking at it. Having to Ultra Ball for Festivity to kind of have an assurance policy for next turn whenever this would do, well, it's going to go down to an Iron Hands. I'm pretty certain of that.
But if we're going to grab the Festivity, we could have still used a Trolley and found an additional Budyu or an additional Magmar as well. So it did look like Daniele was caught in 2 minds as to what to pick. Eventually landed on the Festivity, knowing that his hand just needs help.
Yeah, but if you grab something like the Trolley, you could have grabbed 2 cards out of the deck, finning the deck a bit further, which is a lot of players talk about. We want to have the deck thinner. Goes for the retreat into Volcanion. Does the Scalding Steam, gets the burn on top, and then we get to go Itchy Pollen for 10, plus burn, 20 more, and Joltik has, well, 30 HP, which means a knockout.
That's one of the easier KOs you can find with the Itchy Pollen. Frankie can go straight into his free retreat pivot Pokemon, the Mew EX. Not only is this a great card to draw an additional few every now and then, but also it helps out in this instance by being a free retreat, allowing you to decide what you want to do with your turn after drawing your additional card. But it feels like an easy one. There are no Pokemon here. We can't play the 1 Ball Search card in our hand, so we pretty much just have to go in with Iron Hands EX here.
Yeah, and not too bad. If you're looking at it from Frankie's point of view, not much pressure being put on from Daniele. Yes, there's an item lock going on, but you can just go retreat into hands and take a knockout because Daniele's not showing that they've set up a board that's actually capable of taking out an Iron Hands at this spot. And it means, yes, again, we're going to get full value out of these pair of hands.
These hands are doing some miraculous work here. Actually going to be Boss's Orders taking out a Magmar, recognizing that Magmortar is the main fuel for the damage output of the burn. So we are going to take the opportunity to yoink one of those basics off the bench and keep this Iron Hands nice and healthy, no matter what Daniele comes up with.
I mean, there's no fire without fuel, and if you're taking away the fuel, which is Magmortar and Volcanion, if you're just chucking away those pieces, it's going to get more difficult here. Oh, and a Festivity flipping itself over to Frankie's side of the board on the script here, getting an Ultra Ball of Energy and a Magmar. Some more setup pieces, which is nice. We're still just looking at a situation, Joe, where it's like, we need more and we need better.
Yeah, something like a Defiance Band would have been huge here, just to start ramping that damage. The 1 Ultra Ball can allow 1 Magmortar.
Yeah, there is an Arven in hand, so we could go Arven, we could go Ultra Ball for something like Latias, we could go Arven exactly for that Defiance Band, being able to chuck some more damage into play, although we still need to hit Magmortar to actually start putting on pressure onto his hands and fretting a 2-hit knockout on it.
We're discarding the Arven with Ultra Ball now. So that's 1 Magmortar established. I believe that is there Jet Energy in this hand, so you can move into the Budgie that way. This deck has to have so many pivots. The Latias Skyliner, the 4 Jet Energy, the Surfers, the Switches. You have to get in and out with the Volcanion EX so frequently. That's why it's built in this way. But 1 Magmortar established, 1 Magmar in the hand for future. Again, it sounds like a situation where we really need the burn to stick for a turn on these coin flips to start ramming any of this damage.
We're perhaps talking that there could be a boss's orders on Maraudon, hoping that there's no energy in hand for Frankie. Although Joltik is a deck that plays a lot of energy, you kind of have to start taking your chances sometimes. But we do see the Volcanion going for the Scalding Steam, which means burn onto the active, and we're probably locked into going into Budgie for the Ichipon, unless you want to be promoting either Magmar, that only has 140 HP, we know what happened last game with that, or you want to keep this Volcanion active and just start soaking up some burn damage.
It might be best to stay active, honestly. And Daniela, again, is thinking, maybe that's the play. No, it is eventually going to be the Jet Energy to the Budgie for 1 more Itchy Pollen. 4 damage counters in addition to the 1 from Itchy Pollen itself during Pokemon Checkup.
A massive
5, sorry.
Oh, tail. All right, that's really good. It means there's going to be 50 additional damage onto the Iron Hands going back. But we need to find somehow to deal 180 damage, which I think, if we were looking at the Fine Span last turn, it could have been possible with like double Magmortar and stuff like that. But in this instance, even with the Fine Span being drawn next turn, I have even been used this turn, it does look really, really hard for Daniele to go on and actually kind of establish a board state that would be nice for the situation and try to deal with these pair of hands.
The tandem unit now for Frankie. Does he want any additional lightning Pokemon on the board, or is he just scouting for a potential Arven here again for future turns? Boss's orders in the hand also. Doesn't feel like there's any great target with the Bravery Charm to Magmar now. So I feel like you will just be going through Budgie. The only headache is there aren't any additional Crisp in here to refresh energy across the other attackers you require. Yeah,
Frankie looking for the different options that will be available to them later in the game, of course, with Blood Moon or Saluna. Arven could be used there to get something like Prime Catcher as well, oftentimes. And yeah, Frankie is doing what most of these better, like really, really good players are doing, scouting out what am I actually going to be doing, not just looking at the right now moment, because, well, yeah, of course you're going to use, thank you very much, with Iron Hands to go down to 2 prizes, but you're then start to look at what do I then do from there, and trying to look at how do I lose the game? Well, that's pretty hard to actually identify at this stage, but also how do I win the game, which is actually the most important question you could always ask yourself.
Frankie goes up 3 prize cards now, and removes the burn, which is handy. You expect Daniela will be able to establish it regardless, but there's only 1 card in Daniela's hand. It's a boss's orders, so we need to top deck and flip the script to help out a lot here. It's time for that Blood Moon Ursaluna. Bearing in mind, we discarded it early on in the game in addition to 2 of our Night Stretcher, so we need to find our final Night Stretcher or an Arven here to have any response into this Iron Hands EX.
Ideally, what I'm hoping off to flip the script is Night Stretcher, Jet Energy, and Iono would be the perfect. There's Night Stretcher!
That's a huge hit, Jesper.
Wow, if we off the Iono can then go ahead and get any way of getting into, well, we need to actually get Jet Energy since there's 2 prizes on Frankie's side. Wow, what a flip the script.
We'll hold the phone. Defiance Band to the active, and Daniela does in fact play Reversal Energy as well. Blood Moon Ursaluna EX can be put into play, brought back, but then shuffled to the bottom, so we're giving ourselves future ball search outs. But here, this Iono, 5 cards, if we can find Reversal Energy, we could be taking a KO with our Searing Flame from Magmortar of all things.
Yeah, that'll be dealing 120, and 120 plus 110 is equaling 230 damage, but there's no Reversal Energy.
There's nothing here, Jesper. We can't even move this Magmortar now.
No, at least it has 130 HP, but Daniele looks like an extension of the hand and sees the writing on the wall. Not that we know what's in the hand of Frankie, but yeah, that was just too tough. When we're asking the question, you need to hit. Hits off to flip the